Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to do the intro again in my room because if you remember we had a memory card malfunction, so we have lost some of the data. Now we're going to check out how we did the trunk because it was actually damaged, repaired pretty poorly, and it had a fair bit of rust, so we just decided to make a big part of it by ourselves. I think you're going to enjoy the DIY process of it, and we're going to take a look at how we got around the problem with the hood because there was rust in the cavity between the reinforcement and the sheet metal. I'm going to show you how we went about it and also how we protected the parts that were in the citric acid. If you remember, we used water and citric acid to get rid of most of the rust with the smaller components like front suspension components and stuff like that, and also we repaired the gas tank, so we needed to protect it before flash rust comes. So this and a lot more in this episode. Enjoy. Here you can see the rust and the patchwork that wasn't up to our standards, so we broke out the trusty old cheap plasma cutter and started working on our own DIY tool that we used then to shape the rear wall of the trunk lid. We were grinding, so we got it into the shape roughly, because then we were just doing it by hand a little bit, but we wanted to mimic the shape that was the curvature on the trunk lid itself. We used this tool to kind of determine the curvature and the line for it. We then compared it onto the trunk lid itself and then mimicked it. Then we just hammered in the shape. This process took quite some time because we wanted to be careful not to damage or distort the metal too much. Now we needed to do this shape for the entire rear wall if we wanted to mimic the edge, so it's going to follow the contour and the lines of the car. This is the final result. It looked pretty well, but now it needed to be welded on, which was a little bit of a problem. Then we used this tool to kind of determine the curvature of the trunk lid, so it followed the contour of the patch nicely. Then it was just time to weld, doing it slowly so it doesn't distort the metal too much. This is the final result of the welds. Then I have used a wire brush attachment on the angle grinder to get rid of all the old paint off of the reinforcement of the trunk lid. It's made out of a reinforcement and the outer shell, so they both needed to be scrubbed of the old paint because I wanted to come to the bare metal to assess the state of it, repair the rust and get a nice base for a fresh color. This was now joined together and it started to look pretty okay. This was done by a 1mm cold rolled mild steel. Then it was time to once again wire brush the entire inner shell because we wanted to then close it off. So wherever the reinforcement, as you can see here, was, we just stripped it off, applied phosphoric acid based rust remover, then scrubbed it off and applied rust converter on a tannic acid base. So this took care of our rust and created a nice foundation for the primer color to go in. We applied it on the entire shell as well, so we were safe that no rust was left behind. This is the way it looked. As you can see, it was all covered with this protection film and it was ready to be painted. We painted it in gray primer and then covered with red acrylic paint, so it closed off the primer and sealed it, kind of protected from rusting. This is the inner chamber, so it doesn't have to look too pretty but needs to prevent the rust from forming. This is the way it looked, and then it had to be joined together. Firstly, we kind of assessed how it fits, so we had a nice idea of fitting it and if we have to kind of work anything else. As you can see, we matched the curvature pretty nicely, and then we spray painted a little bit more so to kind of protect, and then we applied the seam sealer to kind of seal the joint together. Then it was a matter of hammering it into the position. We have used a heat gun to kind of make the paint soft and the seam sealer, so the process was a little bit easier and we didn't crack any paint or stuff like that, even though the paint was fresh anyways. Then it was just the final beating to get the edge closed off nicely, and we're pretty sure that this thing will not rust anytime soon. regarding the hood, we have applied paint remover, but sadly it didn't do too good of a job. We have used the foil to kind of cover it up to keep the fumes in, but even with that the result weren't too great. I tried to remove some of the paint. Where there was some thick layers, it kind of worked, but it had to be scrubbed off with a wire brush anyways. And we also used grinding discs. We also applied some phosphoric acid based rust remover to kind of keep the fumes in and to eat away the rust. As you can see, the results were pretty ugly, but it actually looks a lot worse than it actually was, because once you started to scrub it off, it started to come out and looked pretty decent. Then we have used a fishing line attached to a couple of attachments and tried to pry it into it, and then just moving it, we started to break the seam sealer in between the reinforcement and the sheet metal. We had to do it because we wanted to separate the reinforcement from the sheet metal like we did on the trunk. This was a pretty tedious work and took a lot of time, but it had to be done. And the moment of truth, getting the reinforcement out. Already it started to look like a good idea to get it out because there was a bunch of rust in hidden corners, and we just wanted to clean it off as best as we can. Here you can see a couple of photos of the state from the hood on the inside. It wasn't too good, but we started to grinding it off. It's not finished yet, so I cannot show you the final product, but most of the rust is already scrubbed away, so I think it's going to come along nicely like the trunk lid. And of course my friend laid out some paint on my components. We used an epoxy 2-component primer. We went by his workshop and he sprayed some paint on. They came along very nicely. Thank you Itis again for helping me out, because it was much easier to paint at his place. Once the white primer paint was on it, it already started to look very nice. When we started to put on some black polyurethane cover paint, it just came out like new ones. So I'm very happy with the result. Thanks again for all the help. Here are a couple of photos of the final result. And now it's just waiting to be put together and go into the car. Okay guys, this is it for this video. We're going to see each other in the next episodes. I got some interesting stuff coming up because we're going to now slowly tackle the protection of the body. So this and a lot more coming up. Enjoy, stay healthy, take care, bye.